Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and I am back with another video. This one is going to be covering the new cards that have come out from World at War Global Conflict, the final one. This was a video that I was planning on doing actually in a couple days because the reveals were supposed to happen in the next couple days seemingly, but we've just seen all 7 new cards revealed in just a few hours ago, so I want to just get a video out as quickly as possible. These cards are mostly focusing around Japan, but there's also some British, French, and Italian cards. If you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and then let me know down in the comments below which card is most interesting to you, because I think there's actually some pretty cool stuff in here. Definitely expect some deck techs, and you don't want to miss out on those either. With that out of the way, let's jump into the first card, Edge of the Empire. It is a Japanese standard order. It costs 2 credits, and it says, shuffle your hand into your deck. Draw 3 cards at the end of turn. So what this essentially is potentially a 2-credit draw 3 if you have no cards in hand. This is very clearly something like a Japan aggro card. Being able to cheaply draw several cards gives the deck some powerful benefits. Most notably, I think this is actually stronger than one of the other Japan draw options, which is expansion. This has previously been the option for Japan aggro if it did not go towards a feigned retreat, which is arguably the strongest option for Japan aggro at the moment. However, expansion, I would say, because of its condition of the front line, was a bit harder to make work. In comparison, the Edge of the Empire is able to potentially draw you numerous cards and very effectively can just kind of always be an active thing. The only condition is just dumping your hand, which Japan aggro is quite good at doing. So I think in any Japan aggro deck that is looking to not look for feigned retreat will probably make use of Edge of the Empire. On top of that, there's also been several cards that have been printed over the previous expansions that kind of work with empty hands. Notably, the Sakura Regiment, my bad, is a 1-credit 3/3 if you have fewer cards in hand than the enemy. And with Edge of the Empire, you can pay 2 credits and have no cards in hand. And there's also the Yamagata Regiment, which, if you have no cards in hand, is a 2-credit 2/3 Blitz Fury Ambush. So there's potentially some powerful synergies there where players are able to take those cheaper units and activate them consistently, even if the enemy is also playing like aggro, or you're not able to dump your hand as quickly because of Edge of the Empire. To where I think the card will end up, I think that it potentially there's the potential that non-German ally decks start popping up with Japan aggro. Right here, I have a list that is quite old, over half a year old at this point, but this was an OCC deck list making use of US as the ally, and its use was buffing up your early infantry with the US, and generally just kind of winning through overwhelming with very quick numbers. Honestly, this deck seems like maybe one of the best places to put this. By quickly dumping your hand, the Yamagata Regiment and the Sakura Regiment, both potentially are going to be activated. And Edge of the Empire, I think, is again just a superior form of expansion. So I think that this could be a new way to build Japan aggro. And there's even, again, some other benefits. Like, if you run US, you get access to some really powerful stuff, like the 109th Combat Engineers, and then also something like Red Devils, alongside, the standard stuff like 99th Infantry Battalion. And those are quite powerful tools for Japan aggro. Turn 1, 15th Cavalry Regiment into 99th is a 4-3 in the front line that gets to attack every turn for free. That's quite powerful. And you can even make this stronger with the USAS. I know that's not how you pronounce it, but that's how I always say it. This seems like arguably one of the best places to put this. Now, this list specifically, I would not probably run it in. Like, there's definitely needs to be some updates to this because we've had stuff like Red Devils come out, which are very, very strong and should be in this deck. But this is, I think, a template and probably the first place that Edge of the Empire should be tried out in. Moving on, we get to Sunrise Division. Sunrise Division is another Japanese card. This time it is a limited infantry. It costs 2 credits and has 1 operation cost. It is a 3/3, and it has deployment, gets +6/+6 if your HQ has 10 or less defense. So this is potentially a 2 credit 9/9 infantry if you have less than 10 HP on your HQ. That is massive. 9/9 is pretty much so big that it'll essentially kill anything outside of like the late game heavy tanks like the Tigers and the IS-2 and Pershing. It is incredibly big and it is very cheap. Now, the deck that I think everybody's going to think about is a self-damage deck, which is I think where the card will fit best into. Self-damage is obviously able to hurt itself and use Sunshine Division in a very effective manner. Being able to use it in the mid-game could be extremely powerful for just having this big board swing, especially because it's cheap, so you're able to do other stuff on a turn, lower your HP below 10, or your HQ below 10, and then play a 9/9. And that's potentially a lot of tempo and might be enough to make self-damage good. For a long time, self-damage has not really wanted to use Japan because the only real tool that Japan has had is the Type 1 37mm. And this card is not bad, but it's not enough of a reason to go Japan over other options. I actually have an old deck tech that used to use Soviet Britain because you were able to run some healing options in there, and that would allow you to better manage your health total. But now I think we can truly kind of commit to self-damage and make use of that because we really want to activate Sunshine as quickly as possible and slam them down in the mid-game alongside stuff like the Type 1 37mm and other various options. On top of that, there's also potentially a lot of tempo within this deck. Self-damage, most notably, has Red Dawn, which is not something that a lot of people are running, but is incredibly good against a lot of the common meta decks at the moment. Being able to kill off a Humber turn 1 before the enemy can buff it at all in the Combined Arms deck, or a Swordfish, or anything like that on turn 1, is really, really powerful. Like, that is potentially game-winning as you dislodge that early momentum the enemy has. And by being able to turn that 3 damage to your HQ into a benefit through high-tempo options like the Type 1, the Sunshine, and the 34th Guards, you're able to then shift gears and put pressure on the enemy before they're able to find their ways to close the game out against you. Now, I do think that there will need to be a lot of experimentation with this deck, because when you run so much self-damage, you do actually need to run healing. And the Soviets do have some options, stuff like the 329th Engineer Battalion and the 845th Rifles, I do think should probably work its way into the deck in order to have at least a little bit of healing in order to offset it when we need to. It does have a few guards also, but I think that we'd also lean into some more guards. And there's a lot. I definitely plan on doing a deck tech on this, but I think this is where Sunshine would shine the best. There is also maybe some consideration if we are to go with a Japan control deck. However, my concerns with that are we're not able to really make use of it reliably. Home Defense is a card that would encourage a mainline, the mainline or the main nation Japan and a self-damage deck. And maybe that is true. Maybe you could get away with swapping them and taking a Japan main nation alongside a Soviet self-damage package. How strong that's going to be, I do have some doubts, because I think the Soviets have like a critical mass that they just can't fit into 12 ally slots, but maybe there's something there, because Home Defense would be a good inclusion into such a deck. I think that in a control deck, Sunshine is maybe a little too difficult to activate right now. Japan doesn't have a lot of healing, but it also is not, I think, looking for a 2-credit 3/3, even if it does occasionally turn into a 9/9, which is quite powerful. But most slower Japan decks, at least right now, are going to kill you through blitz fighters alongside like kamikazes. They're not really like looking to beat you down through efficiently costed units. So I don't think the Sunshine will work there. Moving on, we have the Tuirima. So the Tuirima is a French unit, a French infantry. It is a limited. It is a 5-credit, 1 operation cost, 3/6, and then it has guard, and the effect, at the end of your turn, give each other friendly unit mobilize. So that's a big effect. Like, holy crap, that is a big effect. The Tuirima is essentially turning even modestly sized boards into potentially scaling threats. And that's quite shocking. Now, I think the first thing we're all going to think of is looking into a British-French mobilized deck. They already run a lot of mobilized units, and they do run a fair amount of non-mobilized units. So being able to potentially have these 5-credit 3/6 guards that, you know, are decent guards on their own right, and then also re-give all of your units mobilize, potentially makes them quite a scary threat. And I do tend to agree. This could be an excellent addition for a mobilized deck that is looking to have a little bit more late game punch. Mobilize sometimes ends up really crutching on the Potez 6311, and although the Potez is very, very strong and clearly like one of the best build-arounds for Mobilize, the Tuirima could help to make the deck stand a little bit more on its own when it's not finding those Potezes quickly enough. So there's, I think, a potential to make the deck more resilient to various things in general. On top of that, the guard is just a nice effect in order for it to not get like walloped too rapidly. You're not going to be like suffering from a slow play. I think that the combination of making your entire board need to be like demobilized, alongside the fact that you have to kill the Tuirima if you want to remove the mobilize, is very, very powerful, and probably makes it like a premier threat. If it doesn't see play now in Mobilize, I really think that it might see play in the future. There's just, I think, a lot of power that is kicking around behind it. And I think that maybe we would see new versions of Mobilize pop up in the future. Maybe if we see more buffs, like if we see buffs to something like the Char B1, you could do a mobilized like loss effect. So you have like these bigger mobilized units, and when they lose mobilize, you get some effect. And then after that, you play like the 2E or like the H75C1, and you use those to give them mobilize again so they can lose it and get another effect. That's definitely like a pipe dream right now. We'd need to see like more new cards or like a major overhaul to several of these like bigger mobilized units. Stuff like the Char B1 and the 155C need to be like overhauled for that to function. But I do think the Tuirima in general is just going to pop up in Mobilize, and it might even pop up elsewhere. I have another video that used to be a US-French Mobilize deck, making use of the Chasing Shadows cards, alongside stuff like the buffed Hotchkiss. And although I thought that it was inferior to that of the previous US frontlines, the Tuirima adds potentially an incredibly powerful late-game card to the deck. Being able to turn a US deck that has gotten something like We Can Do It on it, and making that into a board that is constantly getting mobilized, sounds oppressively strong. Not only is your board clear immune to, or not only would you be immune to board clears, but you also have to remove the Rima and then deal with the fact that there's probably like 4 or 5 units with mobilize on the board. It's potentially maybe another option, and I think that it could maybe work out. With that said, let's move on to the next card, which is Monsoon Rot. Monsoon Rot is a 6-credit British order, and it says set the defense of each enemy unit to 1. So this is a pretty powerful looking effect. Being able to instantly set the enemy up to die to any damage is something that we don't see a whole lot, and potentially makes Monsoon Rot into a hard board clear. And that is true. There are some things that end up working with it quite well, most notably the cheap ping effects, such as like the Tora from Japan, which is probably the easiest combination and the one that a lot of people are going to think of first. You pay a total of 8 credits and you're guaranteed to blow up the enemy board regardless of how big or powerful it is. Now that is potentially quite powerful, although it is notable to say that a British Japan deck that is playing for control has not ever really worked, and I don't think Monsoon Rot fixes enough problems in order to become a massive issue. I think that the better place for it is actually in a British commando deck, because this allows pings from the number 10 commando in order to allow them to instantly kill anything off. And in many ways, that ends up reminding me of Long Range Desert Group. And Long Range Desert Group, I would argue, is maybe a little bit stronger because it's cheaper and it sticks around if you've stuck commandos. So you're able to use it on multiple turns, where Monsoon Rot is a one-time thing, and then you still have to potentially keep following it up with more orders and also play more copies of it if you want the effect more than once. So there's potentially a fair amount of places that would look to Monsoon Rot, but I do think overall that it's kind of just slightly worse copies of Long Range Desert Group in the decks that would really consider Monsoon Rot, and I don't think that the decks that would want Monsoon Rot just kind of on its own are good enough to really become meta lists. So there's definitely a lot of power behind Monsoon Rot, but I'm actually going to say I don't expect it to see a whole lot of play. It might end up as one of the weaker cards of the set overall and just might not end up seeing play. That cost is just so prohibitive, and the decks that want it they have other problems that Monsoon Rot does not fix. Moving on, we have Attack in the Colonies. This is an Italian special. It is 4 credits, and then it has the text, deal 3 damage to an enemy, your HQ gains 3 defense. So this is a pretty simple effect. You are paying 4 credits in order to essentially get a mix of removal and healing, and that is honestly not bad. When you take a look at Italy's roster, there definitely is some steep competition for removal, but I think that the combination of the fact that it can be removal, healing, and potentially face damage, because it says an enemy, so it can hit the enemy HQ, means that it's very flexible. This is a German-Italian control deck that has cropped up in the recent tournaments, so this is a pretty up-to-date list as to what various decks are running, and I think that in the comparison of what's being run, you could maybe find room for something like Attack in the Colonies. I would say the biggest, like, for example, Tactical Strike could potentially be swapped out quite easily for the Attack in the Colonies. It's a little more expensive, true, but you get some additional healing off of it, and the card is not dead if you get stuck in longer, slower matches that maybe don't play as many units. So I think that Attack in the Colonies is just very, very flexible, and I think is a decent consideration. It's not a standout power card like say, Mare Nostrum, but I do think that it probably will see play in Italian control decks. It's just flexible, fills a couple nice gaps all in one card. I think it's overall just very solid. Then we have the RNZAF Kitty Hawk. This is a British special fighter. It is 5 credits, operates for 2, and then is a 3/4, and has the text, when a unit is deployed, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ and gain 1 defense. So this works for both your own units and enemy units, meaning that this is potentially very, very powerful. I will probably say that the first place that I thought of putting it was again in Mobilize. There are several cards that really benefit from you playing out and gaining small increments of HP, most notably the 73rd Infantry Regiment, but also something like the the French Commando Kiefer, which is a card that will randomly ping whenever you gain defense. So this is potentially a good package for Mobilize. Now, the Kitty Hawk is quite slow. 5 credits is nothing to sneeze at. That's slow, and it only has 4 health, so it's coming in quite vulnerable. And it doesn't really have any protection in its own right. And if you want to set up protection for it, that's going to be more credits on it. So the Kitty Hawk definitely might not... It might end up too slow overall to be worth it, especially if you want to combine it with other cards. However, the combination of additional healing and damage does fit really well in a commando deck. Plus, it's also an air unit, and it's a decent air unit, so there's always the option for British Air to consider it. And although it does have some strong competition like the Lightning and the Mosquito, I think overall it probably is good enough to at least be tried out in British Air. So I think that the main place would be Mobilized, but Brit Air might actually be interested in it, because there are some decks that have a very hard time removing it, and that additional, say, 4 to 5 healing could be enough to push you over the edge, especially if you're racing, because you get that extra damage in also. So could be potentially game-winning in some certain matchups that don't run much removal, like, say, Japan aggro or various other aggro decks. Then we have the final card, the 114th Infantry Regiment. This is the Japanese elite. It is an infantry. It is a 4 credit, 1 operation cost, 3/3. It has ambush and smokescreen, and says when a friendly destruction effect triggers, it triggers twice. So, first off, the artwork is awesome. I love it. I love the elephants, you know. That's very awesome on its own right. But also, that double destruction effect is very interesting within Japanese decks. Most notably, Japan aggro is notable for running a fair amount of destruction effects. Stuff like Akita Regiment and the Mito Regiment, both being able to double their effects, could be very, very strong. Now, the question comes down to how many destruction effects do we need to reliably activate the effect? Something such as, is 6 enough like this list is running? I would probably say no. I think we need to run all 4 Mitos and all 4 Akitas to consider it. And maybe that's not even enough, and we need to lean into other destruction effects in order to make it consistent enough. Stuff such as like maybe the 61st Infantry Regiment, stuff like the 1st Taipei Regiment, and even maybe something like the Hayabusa might have to be considered in order to get that destruction effect number up. But if you do get this down and can't activate even just 1 or 2 destruction effects, that's actually insanely powerful and gives some decks like extra reach that gives Japan aggro some extra reach that is potentially very, very powerful. I think that it might be a bit of a tough inclusion in the current list. You definitely have to kind of build around it, and there's no way to like consistently tutor it up. So that might be like enough to make it not worthwhile now, but if more destruction effects come out, which they do slowly and consistently, we could really see it. There's also maybe some consideration for slower Japanese decks to make use of it, most notably because they have stuff like 61st Infantry Regiment or the Takasaki Regiment, which both are decent guards that, if their destruction effect is doubled, is pretty good. Maybe we'd need to see a few more large destruction effects in order to make it worthwhile, but there's potentially a couple places I could see the 1/14th working its way into. And they're quite different in how they go about building their decks, so I'd be very interested to see that. But otherwise, that is it in terms of the new cards. Again, let me know down in the comments below which one gets you most excited. I personally would say Sunrise Division is the one I'm most excited about. I love more niche decks, and this card seems like a powerhouse in self-damage, which is a deck I've actually enjoyed messing around with again and again, and this is a huge boost to it, so I'm very excited to try that out. But I'm just curious to hear what everybody else is. Make sure, again, to also like and subscribe, because I'm going to be doing some deck techs when this comes out on May 10th, so you're not going to want to miss out on when I end up doing some coverage of how these different cards and decks work. Definitely some spicy builds that I got planning that I'm pretty much hinting at and telling you in this video. But otherwise, that is all I have for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and have a good day.